Hello, we're live. Um, this all feels fairly bizarre. I've never been live on YouTube before. I don't have my own YouTube channel. I'm on someone else's channel. I'm not Michael. But this is the On the Ball podcast. We are going live without Michael Bailey. That's a first. So I'm very excited, slightly nervous. Lots of things could potentially go wrong. So, if you're thinking Michael's not here, then at least stay tuned for that. And otherwise, we, assuming all does go to plan, should have a pretty good podcast on the way. And the reason for that is we have a lovely panel here. We have Callum, we have Hodgie the Hack, better known to you all as Stuart, and we have Dan. Michael normally faffs around at some point with Facebook or something. I'm not going to do that, so apologies if you're expecting something slightly different. I'm just going to crack on with the podcast. And we'll keep our fingers crossed for a good one. So, all being well, this should work. And we'll crack on with On the Ball. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to On the Ball, the podcast that isn't 6 foot tall or 18 years old, but still knows how to have a good time in an away end. You join us for episode 118, and I'm Steve Sanders, aka at NCFC Numbers, sitting in for Michael Bailey, who has wisely decided not to risk antagonising another set of Yorkshire natives. So, a week that has yielded 4 points, a rise up to 4th place, and perhaps a more optimistic forecast for Norwich City. And say it quietly, but our performance is starting to become a tiny bit good. Well, just as well, there are always plenty of fixtures in the football calendar in November and December as we start to play our way into some kind of form. Plus, we'll be asking whether diamonds are forever, talking goal-scoring midfielders, keeping heroics, quick-fire goals, jumpers for throw-ins, and a club who simply cannot score against the Canaries. Here to analyse all of that and more, and to help me pad as I probably lose my way through this live broadcast at some point, we very helpfully have an expert panel, starting with a man who has an enviable 100% win record watching Norwich City away from home this season. He's already taken his mic off mute, knowing that it's him who's about to be introduced. It is, albeit, played 1-1-1. Dan Brigham. Dan.
Hello, Steve. I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. We did see each other on Saturday before the game, so fairly well acquainted with each other, but not after the game. So yes, I'm hoping that you had a good Saturday from sort of 3 p.m. onwards.
Yes, all excellent. I'd say obviously not quite as good as pre-match. We're hanging out with you, which is always a delight. I say always; it's probably happened twice now. But yeah, really good fun, and the game backed it up as well. Really good away day.
You say always. It's occasionally a delight hanging out with me if I'm in the right frame of mind. But likewise, we had a great time in the Bridge Inn. Would recommend. Windows are boarded up from the outside. Very nice vibe on the inside. So anyone going to Rotherham in future years, yes.
There was a skeleton of a sausage dog on the bar as well. Just to add to the ambience.
Yeah, it was quite the ambience, I would say. Anyway, better introduce guest number 2. A Scottish man has scored for Norwich City, so we've rubbed our tartan lamp to summon up a Scot. Whereas definitely felt better in writing that one. And arriving with a puff of smoke is Stuart Hodge.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Norwich City fans. It's been a long time. I've not been on this in ages, but because King Kenny scored, I thought, I've got to do it.
Am I right in thinking the last time you were might have been the pre-season prediction pod?
No, maybe before that. Maybe on that. I don't know, mate. To be honest, I lose track.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I asked. We have done our homework on this. It's a well-oiled machine without Michael. That's what happens. Well, moving swiftly on then. I'll introduce our third guest. We've allowed him some bereavement leave to come to terms with the sad passing of Wits End, but he's back and he's bouncing today. It's one half of the creators of the Twitterkers Twitter account, Callum Howard. Callum, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Too soon, actually. Too soon to
I'm
mention
sorry.
to it because it's left a deep and painful hole in my heart. And I still tear up every time I hear Kenny had the business. And I like to think that Kenny's goal at the weekend was a tribute to that very special segment of the podcast. So.
Yeah, I think he has said before that any time he scores now, he's going to kind of raise one arm to the sky and say that was for Wits End. Yeah, I don't know whether he did come through with that or not, but certainly it's a tough one for all of us. We all miss it dearly.
I've got a question.
Already?
Because I think Norwich City as a whole have done their own tribute by driving supporters to their wits' end, like so far this season.
Is that a question, or are you putting that forward as a statement of fact?
I'm factualizing it. I'm saying that's a statement of fact, mate. It's quantifiable and verifiable.
Well, please leave a comment if you agree with that. In fact, I haven't left anything in the script for comments, but if you would like to make a comment, you're still able to do that. We will be checking them. In fact, I'm going to use this opportunity now to ask the panel if they would check for them, if they can indeed see them. And we'll
I can see them.
Well, Hodgie is himself, and I believe Callum has already commented as well.
Wow.
I have, yeah.
We're having a
personal brand in there.
Hashtag engagement.
Conversation. Yeah. Well, that's what you come for. We're, it's not a one-way thing. We want to hear what you have to say, and then we'll also respond to it, potentially disagreeing with it. But, if it's a good point, we might not. Anyway, should we press on? Please do leave a comment. But in the meantime, let's have the headline act. So far, I pressed all the right buttons. So, after an entertaining, if goalless encounter at Carrow Road against QPR on Wednesday, Norwich City's dreams were made up at the concrete jungle of the New York Stadium in Rotherham on Saturday. The Canaries came away with 3 points thanks to the aforementioned Kenny McLean, scoring for a fifth consecutive season for Norwich City, and an Aaron Ramsey winner that took just 22 seconds of football to create. Norwich have now won 3 straight away games in Rotherham by a 2-1 scoreline, only the second time in the last 50 years that they've won by the same score at the same ground 3 times in a row, the other being the last 3 1-0 wins at Middlesbrough, and more on them later. So, Dan, 1 or 2 moments of good fortune, but we got the job done with the results. Was that more like the kind of sort of rollicking cut and thrust championship encounter that we're after this season?
It was definitely blood and thunder. I'm not sure it's what we're after, but it was good fun. It was a bit of a fight. Isaac Hayden and Max Aarons took on the entire end behind the goal of Rotherham fans. There were some dodgy yellow cards, a bit of play acting, some robust challenges. One really great one from Isaac Hayden early in the second half, actually. It was good fun. It was a really good away day. Really annoyed the Rotherham fans who seem to hate us and have done for a number of seasons now. And it was a little step in the right direction again, sort of on the back of a decent, cohesive performance against QPR, and those final 20 minutes against Stoke. It's backed it up. And I joined in the chorus of people slightly bemused by the starting lineup, I think, and sort of pompously tweeted about why Dean Smith was leaving Todd Cantwell out of the starting lineup and changing formations, but to be fair to Smith, I think he absolutely got it spot on by changing to a diamond, which looked pretty leaky when he did it against Preston, but looked much more solid in this game. And it does mean you get Sargent and Pukki playing in the same team without having to get Sargent out on the right. You get them both playing as centre forward. So formation-wise, personnel-wise, and more importantly than that, I think just commitment-wise, they absolutely did not want to lose that game. They wanted to win that game. It was a real step in the right direction, I think, with many caveats, which I'm sure we'll get onto, but positive, I'd say.
Stu, are you going to be listing off some of those caveats, or are you going to join Dan in the positive vibes?
I think you've got to join in positive vibes. It's getting a wee bit better. I admittedly have been, as per what I'm wearing, cavorting round about Europe following Celtic, so I haven't had my eye on the ball. quite as much as maybe in previous campaigns with Norwich City. But to be honest, I became pretty dejected watching the team. And I've been fortunate enough, I've caught some of the last few games and watched the game against Rotherham. By the way, I want to just say, loved Chris Gorham. Chance in his hand at a wee bit of Portuguese during the commentary. That was cool. You guys maybe weren't aware of that.
Yeah, can we have some context to that?
Well, he said that Gabriel Sara will be obrigado for the assistance that he got. So
doesn't that just mean thank you though?
Does that mean over the moon? Oh, thank you.
No.
So, okay, so Gabriel Sara will be thank you for
thankful. Thankful for the work his teammates and I mean, bit of magic from him, which was great to see. I think it finally looks like Norwich City are actually playing a team befitting the sum of their parts in this division a wee bit at times, which I think has been the really distressing thing about watching Norwich City this season, as they've clanked about like a bag of spanners when they actually have a team that is pretty well tooled. Just to keep the analogy going there, pretty well tooled for the division. So, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think we should be positive. Big positive to come out of me, out of the game for me, and I think we've seen it in the comments there. Neil's mentioned it. Max Aaron's block, and I think just his overall performance. It looks like a wee spell on the sidelines is kind of, I don't know, maybe reinvigorated him for the challenge that. I mean, I see lies ahead, but Max has been over the course a couple of times now, despite his tender years in this division, and I thought he looked like the real Max Irons once again. So I think that was really encouraging. I like the idea, just to quickly expand on what you said, Dan, that there's a bit of fluidity in terms of formation, because I think under Daniel Farke, it was barring like a couple of departures from it, pretty much a kind of one sort of system, and it was the people you plugged into that system. I like the idea that we're working on some adaptability this year, because I think if we are going to go up at some point and try and stay in the division above, then it's going to require a team that is capable of doing different things. And I suppose the other positive, Isaac Hayden, totally different sort of snarling tenacity that's added there, and I think we need a bit more of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. There did seem to be plenty of that on display on Saturday. It's interesting that you say that you've been fortunate enough to watch the last few games, Hodgie, because I think a lot of Norwich fans might say that there's been no fortune involved in that. Callum, both Dan and Stu have mentioned the diamond. What was your view on it? And and I suppose generally, how have you seen the midfield this season? Was that an improvement on Saturday?
Yeah, it was a nice sort of Paul Lambert era nostalgia about it. Reminded me of the diamond that we used to play in those sort of 3 good years, and I think it does a very similar thing to what it did for us there. Was it gives us a fluidity in the middle of the park. It can be slightly flatter, and you can have sort of Sarah and Kenny sitting back a little bit, or Isaac Hayden can be sitting right back and allowing especially Gabby Sarah to just go forward and be incredible. And I'm excited to see what that does for Nunez as well. And if we can find a sort of a settled formation, I'd love to see Nunez plugged into that. But as Hodgie was just sort of mentioned there, is that I don't think Dean Smith is going to have one system. Daniel Farke, to utter his name, and I'm not going to say his name through rose-tinted glasses like half of Twitter, his plan B was to play pan A better. And we all complained about that. And now we've got a coach that likes to experiment and likes to match up to teams and is very intelligent about changing tactics, as long as we don't move away from his 4 core fundamentals that I don't think he's actually told us what they are. He's just told us that there are 4 core fundamentals. And I think that's that's a good thing. Is that we can be progressive enough to match a team rather than just trying to shove a square peg in a round hole like we did for the first half of last season in the Premier League and the year before that. Because I think we've seen that if you go up with one particular style that may have worked incredibly well in the Championship, but unless you've got billionaire owners that can buy you very, very expensive players to do that system without fault, we have to do ourselves some favours. So I really like the diamond, and I think it worked incredibly well. But I'm not holding my breath on seeing it every week. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's that flexibility and that progressive approach towards formation is probably going to be a little bit more intelligent for us this season, and is future-proofing us for when we go up to the Premier League.
Which will be obviously in May, if not sooner. Exactly. I would have thought.
January,
or March. I mean, I don't know what the 4 fundamentals are, but one of them is surely just play Sam Byram somewhere. Just get him in the team at all costs, and then there's 3 others somewhere. I mean, I don't want to kind of go on too much about the midfield, but I think it does suit. Obviously, Hayden at the base is a great fit for that. I think McLean on the left hand side of that midfield. That I was getting slight sort of Simon Lappin vibes from him on Saturday. But obviously Sarah we can talk about as well. But I would like to talk about Aaron Ramsey, who now has 3 goals in 3 games. There was a lot of talk about Todd last week. And yet it's Ramsey who played at the tip of that diamond. Dan, what's your feeling on him? I sort of feel like he's got a bit of a tough time because he's not our youngster, but he's kind of getting the job done at the moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, although you would also say that Todd probably gets a tougher time because it was and still is our youngster as well. Yeah. But yeah, he's an interesting player, isn't he? He sort of drifts out of games quite a lot. That may be down to the fact that we're not quite as sort of possession heavy as we previously were. So it's natural for a number 10 to drift out of games a little bit. But what he does do, and what Sarah is also doing when he's playing, is making those sort of late runs into the box and adding goal scoring options behind Pukki and Sargent, which we didn't have last season in the Premier League at all. So he's providing that, and he's clearly an intelligent footballer. He links up play quite nicely. His movement is really good, and he's obviously kind of enjoying playing in that diamond with 2 strikers in front of him as well. He's obviously got a lot to work on. With his back to goal, he's quite poor at the moment. He sort of loses the ball quite easily as well, but he's making an impact. And after his first couple of appearances, I'm not sure many people kind of expected that to happen, really. But he's been excellent, I think. And just on that diamond as well, what it can do when it works and functions, and we saw this on Saturday, is allow our fullbacks to get further up the pitch. And they were noticeably further up the pitch on Saturday, which obviously helped Max. And what we didn't do when we played the diamond against Preston was provide any cover for when our fullbacks did go up the pitch. But Hayden was doing that, Sarah was doing that, Kenny was doing that. It seemed a more cohesive diamond. But that caveat again is we were playing against a team with probably one of the worst midfields in this division as well. So it would be interesting to see if we do indeed play the diamond again on Saturday against Borough, how it functions against a midfield that, is, although not firing this season, is sort of palpably better and does include the legendary Johnny Howson in there as well.
Yes, and again,
what a game.
More on him later. Yeah, I mean, and he would absolutely love to play on the right hand side of that diamond, and I think may have done a few times under.
Well, when he first came in under Lambert, he was part of that diamond, wasn't he, in the Premier League?
Yeah, just.
And he himself is a diamond. Like that's the keeper.
Yeah.
A good Yorkshire diamond. Who loves fishing? Am I right in thinking that? That's
like one of my favourite things about Johnny Howson is there was a big interview. I think I've told this story on some podcast at some point before. There was a big interview with him asking why he'd gone to Norfolk, and he's like, I like fishing, fly fishing, the Norfolk Broads. He's great for that. And
he bought himself a camper van as well, didn't he, to go fishing in as well around the Norfolk Broads.
I mean, they don't need them like they used to, do they? Like,
that leads me on nicely to another man who's probably loves fly fishing and has got his own camper van to drive around Norfolk, Gabriel Sara. I'm sort of obliged to say that there was a moment of Brazilian magic for the goal. You don't say that about any other nation, do you? But because he's Brazilian, it was Brazilian magic. But then also had a big hand in Rotherham's equaliser as well. So he seems to be getting more confident, though, in my eyes. Does anyone want to talk about the Sara effect? I thought he had a good game on Saturday, and he's looking more and more like worthy of his place in the team.
I think we've had to show some patience to see that, and I think there was a lot of questions asked and a lot of mess thrown in Dean Smith's direction that we'd spent all this money on this player and we haven't seen him play yet. But I tell you what, I'm really starting to get excited for what we could possibly see. Yes, I still think he has some adaptation to do to this league, but as you were saying, those late runs, that little bit of creative spark, and a real passion as well. I watched him for I think it was Aaron Ramsey's goal, and he sort of just stands there and just throws two arms up in the air and just looks around for people like he's completely stunned, and like he's obviously somebody that really, really loves playing football. He loves scoring. He loves being on that winning side, and I think he'll bring that positivity and that energy to the side. And I think he's probably got a little bit of sort of culture adaptation, but I can think of another South American that probably gave away quite a few loose balls and red cards in his time, but we certainly don't look back on him with any kind of regret. So, I'm really excited. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. He's talking about Emi Buendia, everyone. Well, and if he's half the player that Emi was, then obviously I think we definitely take that.
Just on Sara, it was the pre-season pod I was on because we spoke about his shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. Just after I think he'd been hit, like a 50-foot effigy of him had been put up outside the ground. No pressure there. I think I described him as the next Vadis Odija Afoe on that, which
you did. And can I just ask, like, how do we feel the shoulders are like measuring up so far, specifically of his entire body, like the shoulders specifically? How do you feel?
I don't want to be controversial here, but I reckon it's his body shape is slightly more hunched than hench. Maybe I think there's a sort of sloping nature to his shoulders.
It's like a reverse Sterling, isn't he? Whereas Sterling kind of like is very sort of like banana shaped like that, and he kind of runs. He runs like this with his really arched back. Sara's kind of like the other way, and I feel like it's that low center of gravity, and he's kind of like hunched over, ready to barge people off the ball,
like
which he did brilliantly against Rotherham, and with that little piece of magic, produced an excellent moment.
He does look like he's always sort of checking to make sure his shoelaces are tied correctly as well, which is fundamental to being a good footballer. You don't want to be tripping over those, do you?
Yeah. Can I ask, actually, like, what's like other famous gates in Norwich City history, like other famous football playing gates that we've seen at the Cara over the years? Huckerby definitely had a style that was kind of like slightly individualistic, like the way he kind of dribbled and sort of moved his body, I thought.
Darren Eadie was very hunched as well. And I think his massive shorts that Darren Eadie wore made him look like they were too heavy for him. That's why he was sort of stumbling forward the whole time. Grant, we can't talk about. We've got to talk about Grant Hanley, who sort of runs like a frog trying to escape from a predator.
Particularly when he's got a forward bearing down behind him and he's slowing down to try and win a free kick.
Did you know something? Oh, sorry. I was just going to say,
I was just going to go on.
Oh, and you go, Callum.
I was going to say, Close's run when he scored that goal against Ipswich, where he kind of ran a bit like the Rolling Stones, like he just sort of like put his arms back and trotted his way over to the corner flag and then headbutted it. That was One of my favourite Norwich City runs.
Like he was desperately trying to shake his own head off his shoulders.
Yeah, yeah.
I am just on the weekend's game. Like I actually think the defender in the front foot thing was one of the things that I really liked. There was at least 2 or 3 moments where Grant Hanley stepped up beyond his man to make an interception, and it immediately had Norwich City moving on the front foot. And I think we've been quite passive in terms of trying to win the ball in the bits of football that I've seen this season. And it was refreshing to see, like, it seemed that everything's been quite reactionary, whereas I actually felt there was a sense of assertiveness about that display. I mean, obviously, Rotherham away. That said, like my one trip to Rotherham ended with an Elson Oliveira red card and Frank Sinatra booming out at ridiculous volumes at the end of the game. So it was good to see that for Hanley, and I think I wonder just if some shifted, some switched mentally, because there just seemed to be a bit more purpose and wherewithal about body language and about the way they put themselves about.
I would say that I agree with that. Definitely, I would say that probably comes from having a proper holding midfielder, doesn't it? The defender can step out, take that kind of risk to get on the front foot because he knows there's more cover there. You know, like when we had Skip and like when we had Tetty, that adds that kind of confidence to do that. And I think Hayden just really sort of led from the front against Rotherham. I thought against QPR he looked absolutely knackered. Yes. Looked like a massive piece of furniture being wheeled around the midfield quite effectively, but still looked really tired. But on Saturday, he looked sprightly and sort of dominated that midfield. And I think that kind of leadership has been missing in the centre of the park and probably does rub off on the rest of the players as well.
Yeah, I like the idea that you can have an effective piece of furniture being wheeled around midfield, and it could still do a pretty decent job. You know, just stick a futon out there, and it might still work. I think on that note, because really the first 2 sections are fairly interchangeable anyway. Let's move on to things we are not going to talk about. So for those of you who haven't listened before, it's the things that we're not going to talk about that we are going to talk about, but we're not going to talk about. Hope that's clear. That's great. If you don't understand it by now, you probably never will. So first thing, and I hate talking about decisions, but you know, the penalties. Do we want to talk penalties? Do we want to talk a dive? Do we want to talk a handball? Are we veering into Dean Smith post-match press conference here? Do we just want to say which one we thought was more of a penalty out of the 2 that weren't given at either end?
I mean, the handball is a stonewall penalty.
Well, yes.
Absolutely stonewall. It's just as stonewall as Hanley's against Burnley. Just pretty, very, very similar to that. And I don't think their shout was a penalty. And I'm not the kind of fan who's biased like that. I thought we should have Hanley gave away a penalty against Stoke, which wasn't given. It's a coming together. Hayden is slightly stronger. There's no sort of contact, there's no tripping or anything like that. It is not a penalty. That's my 2 pence anyway.
I think we probably look like we all concur with that. In which case, we haven't done QPR yet, have we? So have we got anything to say about what I thought was a reasonably decent 0-0? Callum, did you catch it? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I listened to the dulcet tones of Chris Gorham for that one.
Was he speaking Portuguese or?
No. He was speaking between yawns, I think, actually. No, it was a very entertaining 0-0. But I don't have much more to add than to what's been said. I think if we took our chances, we could have easily have won that game. And that's probably a game that if we played maybe after the World Cup game, maybe in the second half of next year, where maybe we're a little bit more confident, then we may have got a 1, maybe a 2-0 win. You know, and we would have been one of those games where we would have said, yeah, the confidence, the luck was on our side, and we nicked that one. Whereas the confidence, the luck just wasn't on our side. But I still think, you know, we were solid, we were assured. And that's really, at this point, all I can really ask for, is because I think the goals will come. It's just that sort of solidity that I'm focusing on.
in fairness to you, we were speaking before the podcast, and you pretty much said, "I have nothing to say about KPI." So I kind of stitched up really.
That was really mean.
No, well, that's what we do to the first time on this season. You've got to have a little test. Quick mention for Angus Gunn, man of the match in that game and player of the month for October. Not a bad October for him, considering he wasn't in the team and hadn't played a league game, I don't think, before at the start of the month. And the club going to Dubai, I believe, over the World Cup break. I'm assuming that Dean Smith, there's no result on Saturday. I mean, we have talked a little bit about his future, I think, on this podcast, but I'm guessing 7 points from 9. He is now looking secure until we restart at the very soonest, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think the jury is still out, probably. I think we need a positive result against Borough still to start edging towards convincing more people, I think, that he's the right man for the job. But I think, if we don't get a positive result in that game, then we'll be going to World Cup break with similar sort of issues as we've seen this season, I think. But I think we can probably be positive enough after the last couple of performances to think we can get a good result against Borough.
Yeah, it feels like direction of travel is good. Does anyone else have anything that they don't want to talk about?
Just one. Yeah, go on, Callum.
I have just that, I think it's incredible that we managed to get that result when we had the awful player that is Ben Gibson, the awful player that is Kenny McLean in our team, the awful player that's
McLean. Sorry, McLean, like John McLean.
Sorry.
It's McLean in Portuguese, I think.
Yes, see, it's my Portuguese heritage. I just think I thought it was a real statement performance from some characters in the squad, and I'm not going to talk about some of the unfair criticism that they get, particularly on certain platforms and certain public phone-in radio stations. And I think we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I also don't want to talk about how lovely it was to see Ben Gibson kind of step forward a little bit and play a couple of balls, which is something that we haven't seen since that record-breaking championship season, and there was quite a few goals that were started from a Ben Gibson ball from the back to a certain Argentine up front, and I think, yes. Yeah, he made a couple of substitute appearances for Farke. And I think that was lovely to see, because I think that was an interesting and completely different dimension to that Farke team. And I think, obviously, this side is no stranger to lumping the odd ball up the pitch when they've run out of options, to the test of most people in the stands. But yeah, I don't want to talk about how these awful, awful players that we have in our team, for the audio listeners, I'm doing air quotes, that actually I thought had a really, really good game and made a couple of statement performances.
Yep, amen to that. Hodgie?
I'm going to not talk about a couple of things. So on the basis of, I think it's worth remembering, you're talking about what it's like going forward, Callum. Record-breaking defensive run that Hanley and Gibson anchored at this level. I think the interesting thing for me is what we're trying to establish a more solid base, but for going up to the Premier League, whether that's tactically or whether that's in terms of personnel or whatever way you're trying to do it, I think the key thing is managing to do it in such a way that we can actually bridge the gap this time. Because what was a pretty solid team, the second Farke title winning season, was built on, kind of reminded me of Mourinho's Chelsea in a sense, in that it was a lot of 2-0-ish wins.
That's not a comparison I think we've ever had on this podcast.
Stylistically, I should say, just in terms of the fact that we would get 2 goals then cruise, and rather than the swashbuckling symphony, I think is my favourite choice of words for the first Farke title campaign. So I think it's quite good to see that partnership reinstigated, but then that obviously raises the question about what do you do with the potentially 20-30 million pound centre back that you have in your books, you know. So I think that's an interesting thing to maybe think about. And a second thing is a question in from Mark King, just on the back of the gun thing. Do you think Krul is no longer first choice keeper? Which I think is probably the case now. What do you guys think?
Well, Dean Smith certainly thinks it's the case right now. I was asking the question, will we see him back as Norwich number one? I'm not so sure. I mean, it's kind of down to Angus, I suppose. You know, once you've got the shirt, it's kind of a lot easier to lose it than it is to gain it back because you're just not getting the minutes. So I would say it really depends on Angus's form, but I don't see him kind of getting a lot worse. I think he's one of the players that has looked better under Smith than he did under Farker, albeit with a sort of 2-3 year gap in between. And I wouldn't be surprised, Tim being now 34, 35, that he might want to finish his career somewhere else. So I think he's no longer first choice keeper right now. I'm not sure we'll see him again, other than in cup games and if Angus gets injured. That would be my thought. Anyone got anything to add to that, or any point? Any other things that you don't want to talk about? Dan, you're frozen on the screen with your finger like that, so I'm taking that to mean you want to come in. No, you're back.
Am I frozen? I'm back. Right, excellent. This is an obvious thing to say, but probably doesn't get said enough this season. But Pukki in the last 3 games has been outstanding without getting a goal. He was absolutely critical to the goals against Stoke, and it was absolutely critical to the goals again on Saturday. His running has been tireless. Mentally, in terms of his movement and his football intelligence, he's still way too good for the Championship. And I think he'll be very glad now to have a strike partner in Sargent as well, so he doesn't have to do it all himself. I just think it's been fantastic, and it was nice to see that link up between Max to midfield to Sargent and then to Pukki, which was sort of similar to when we used to link up between Max, Emmy, or Stiepermann to Pukki. And that was we saw that again on Saturday. And just one other quick thing, furniture again, but the New York Stadium not having a clock. So we had no idea how many minutes were gone during the game. Was a real pet hate of mine, despite the fact they have a big screen, which was just telling us how to follow them on LinkedIn and Facebook.
And that Kings Lynn had advanced from the first round of the FA Cup. So we couldn't see the time of our own game or the score of our own game, but we could see the score of Doncaster versus Kings Lynn, which was, I don't know whether, was that a nice touch for us? Or, I'd have rather known the score of our own game.
Or just how many minutes were left, that kind of...
Yeah, that would have also,
It doesn't feel like too much to ask for that.
The concept of time maybe hasn't reached Rotherham yet. God, if they weren't pissed off with us before.
New York Stadium and no Times Square on the scoreboard. No,
bit of workshopping that one maybe.
Yeah. Just on the Pukki thing, right? Like, do you think he's adapted his game a wee bit? Because I think he actually has adapted his game to playing with a partner. It almost seems like he's moving. Like he's doing less of the kind of running into channels and pockets movement. It's more like sort of making angles off, and it's just testament to his intelligence that you speak of. Dan,
I guess he has only ever really played with a partner until he came to Norwich under Farker, which is really the first time he's. I mean, I think at Celtic he played with a partner most of the times. He certainly did.
He played wide left, actually. Like, it was interesting. He tended to play most of these games coming in off the left-hand side. Yeah. And when I had a conversation no long after he was brought in with a couple of people at the club, and they suggested that it was actually his goals to game time ratio at Celtic was more impressive than the general consensus of how the spell went. And I think that's proven to be the case, given his goals to game ratio with us.
Well, yeah, we bought him in as either a wide player or a 10, really. It was only when Jordan Rhodes got injured and Farker stuck him up top on his own, and that's when the magic started. So I guess he's certainly with Finland, he always plays up top with a strike partner. So hopefully it's second nature to him.
I mean, what's interesting about Pukki's numbers this season is that he is getting, well, he's got 6 goals and 4 assists, and not normally he's very high, obviously on the goal tally in championship seasons at least, but doesn't get that many assists. And those assists haven't counted the shot against Stoke that was saved, and then either of the two from Saturday. So if you were to throw them in, then technically he's provided more goals than he's scored. So it does seem like this year the goals are being shared around a lot more, but Pukki is still absolutely central to still the majority of goals that go in the opposition's net. So yeah, still absolutely key. I feel obliged at this point, as Michael, I'm sure, would mention that he is out of contract along with a lot of other players in the summer. But maybe
and not on the 2023 calendar, I'm led to believe.
Make of that.
Read into that what you will.
Maybe they just don't think he's one of our 12 most marketable players. You know, you can't compete with the likes of Josh Sargent right now. It's he's in a league of his own. Anyway, have we got? If we've got no more other things that we're not going to talk about, then let's look ahead. John Motson.
This is almost fantasy football.
Okay, this is quite easy this week because Norwich City only have one fixture. And in fact, only have one fixture in the next 33 days, and that's at home to Middlesbrough on Saturday before they sign off for the World Cup break. Borough currently on the longest run without scoring against Norwich City of any team to play the Canaries in their history, 712 minutes and counting. That gives me a chance to wheel this quiz question out again. The last goal Middlesbrough scored against Norwich City was in 2015. Can anyone remember who scored it?
Alex Tettey.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Tet scored the last goal, 2015. Yes, the Brexit referendum hadn't even happened at that point. So what a different world it was.
That's when Borough thought they'd basically sealed promotion, automatic promotion, wasn't it?
And had beaten us 4-0 in the other game that season. And yeah, looked a real force. And then obviously the rest is history with us coming back to beat them in some game that happened after that. I can't remember. Callum, I'll come to you first. Well, you've already talked up Ben Gibson. So can Norwich keep a clean sheet and extend the run?
My heart says, of course we can. My head says, then along came Norwich. Whenever these facts are wheeled out, I always think, here we go again.
I'm the same.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the happy medium that I will take is that yes, they will score against us, but we will score more than they will. And the past two performances to go by, I think we've got a good chance. They're in a less better position than some of the teams that we've played recently, and even though we've been playing sort of bitty so far this season, I still think we've been able to pick up results against teams lower down in the table. So yeah, I think I'm surprised to see a team like Middlesbrough that far down, and I think they will probably come good at some point, but I'm quietly confident, as I always am with Norwich. I think, to use the worn-out analogy so far, that we have turned the corner somewhat, and I'm looking forward to seeing how, again, coming off what I was talking about earlier about our sort of dynamic approach to things, I'm interested to see how we're going to approach this game and how we're going to line up, and how Dean Smith's going to tackle Middlesbrough, because I think it will be different to how we lined up at the weekend, and I think it will be different to how we lined up against QPR, because I think that's the team that we are now.
Yes, absolutely. And whether we stick with the diamond or not will be interesting to see. Dean Smith's not normally one to name an unchanged team. Stu, I was going to do a sort of great English centre midfielders, Michael Carrick, Johnny Howson joke, but as we've already spoken about Howson, I mean, you're shaking your head, but can I remind you of No Time Square? Literally, not 10 minutes ago.
I just don't want it to turn into Scotland v England. It usually does.
What, Middlesbrough v Norwich?
Well, no, that's the Kieran Scott derby, mate. Come on.
Oh, of course it is. Oh, well, in that case, as we've done Johnny Howson, would you like to talk about Kieran Scott? Or you could just talk about whether you think Norwich City will win this football match.
Well, right. the cynic in me says that because some very friendly person who I've just been sort of having a bit of a tiff with on a podcast is getting me a ticket for the game. I will be there. I'll be watching the Canaries in the flesh.
I was beginning to think there, who else have you had a tiffle with on a podcast? And then I realised.
It's my first game since before COVID. So it's a long time since I've seen Norwich City in the flesh. And the last game that I saw them in was the last game before COVID, when we did something rather special against Spurs. I think I think the cynic in me goes, I'm going to be there, so we're going to be rubbish. But and I do have like the kind of feeling that everything kind of points to a Norwich City win, and I'm not that confident in this team yet. But the one thing that I do get is I kind of get the sense, and you're alluding to it there, Callum, that Dean Smith, for all of the criticism and all of there was a pretty abject run for a wee while there. You get the sense that he's beginning to like get a feel for his personnel, for the squad, for the different ways that he can deploy them. And I think if he sticks by the courage, his convictions, and the players deliver a performance, then Norwich City should win. But in terms of consistency of application, because the talent is undoubted. I think we've got the best squad in the division, probably. Consistency of application and consistency of the tactics actually working in a way that at best extols the virtues and gives a platform to the players to produce performances that will win you points. I've still to be convinced. So I kind of think this is a good opportunity for Norwich City to... I mean, it's kind of hard when you're in the top six to call it damage limitation, but given the expectations that the club have, we've won the league the last 2 times we were in it. After a pretty poor run there, I think this is a chance for Norwich City to almost end the first segment of the season on a high, because I've mentioned, I think it's becoming a reality now. This is basically 2 separate seasons. It's 2 mini seasons that we're calling one season. It should have an asterisk in many ways, in my opinion, similar to the COVID season would have, given the nature of it and the denouement of it. So, I think what we can do is we can end the first section in the top 6, having not played at our best. And Dean Smith, when he was at Aston Villa, was one of the managers that best used the COVID break, because prior to that, Villa were sinking like a stone. And he actually used that period to work on various sort of tactical nuances and things like that to make them a much tougher nut to crack at the other side of that break when football started again. So obviously not as long a break this time, but if he can use that time as well as he did at Villa, then I think that's something that could bode really well for us moving forward and what remains of the campaign. But a win at the weekend would certainly, it would end this first section of the season in a real high and give us something to build on.
Yeah, I wonder what his secret is. What's he going to do in that month in Dubai? I don't know whether he's going to get more furniture out there, more mobile furniture out there on the pitch. Dan, what do you reckon? Are we going to stick with the diamond? Are we going to are we going to chop and change again? Are we going to go and change for this one? Maybe we are.
Maybe Dean Smith will surprise us all by not changing it this time.
The old double bluff.
It is. It's a bit of a fun. Middlesbrough were mine, and I'm certainly not alone in this. Quite a lot of people's picks to win the title this season, which in retrospect is quite embarrassing. But they have a good squad at this level, and now they've got kind of a young, interesting manager. And it feels like maybe at the wrong time to play them. By all accounts, they absolutely dominated Bristol City. Just got a draw there at the weekend, but had a whole lot of shots on goal. Had a quick scan of a couple of match reports, and Middlesbrough by far the better side, apparently. But with, if you're a neutral, you probably look at this game and think, on a decent run, Norwich now, they probably should win it. And I think take the sort of slight new manager bounce out of the equation that Middlesbrough might get and look at where they are on the table and the fact they've lost 6 out of their 9 away games this season. and you'll kill a stat about us not conceding in 700 games, or whatever it is, then I think there's enough momentum. And repeating myself here, but what I really like from the Rotherham performance is that sort of the attitude they had in that game, and it felt like a team that knew how to win a game again. Rather, it's sort of everything they've been through last season in the Premier League, everything they've been through this season. Their muscle memory is still there. They know how to win games, and they know how important going into this game is, I think, to finish before the 3-week break on a high. I think I'm fairly confident I'll go for a win with a Johnny Howson 40-yarder for Middlesbrough, just for a bit of fun as well, just so we can stand up and applaud that while also applauding our own win.
Yeah, that would literally be the perfect outcome, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, does it, I guess, alluding to what Stu was saying, does it feel important that we get a win to see us through to that World Cup break, a month without a game? I kind of think back to the COVID, where I have a feeling, I might be wrong about this, because I think you said it was Spurs, and you might actually be right. I have a feeling they lost to Sheffield United after that, and that was the final game. And I'm not saying that was
bad.
Sorry, just cool. We've had another tiff, Stu. I'm calling you out. I'm not saying that was a precursor to how the 9 defeats or whatever that followed. But it kind of feels like it would be a good one to win ahead of what's quite a tricky looking fixture list around the Christmas period. What do you think, Callum?
Yeah, I'm crossing that bridge when we get to it. I think I like what you said about Dean Smith using the COVID break. That sort of brought that period of time that I'd mentally blocked out back to me, and actually how we thought Villa were coming down with us, or we thought that we were going to stay up instead of Villa, and they came back and they were actually pretty good. So I'm interested to see what they do in Dubai. There's a great comment here, another one from Neil Luther. Is it wise, Dean Smith going to Dubai? Dean Smith does strike me as somebody that could get a suntan from a holiday brochure. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing Dean Smith and Craig Shakespeare with nicely tanned skin. And
Shaky would probably rock an excellent tan, wouldn't he? I feel like
I think he looks typical of the kind of person you find in Benidorm that burns.
Yeah, exactly. I think he would
going to have like a white vest outline.
Well, he's never not in shorts, is he? So his legs will almost certainly be tanned. But exactly, Stu, I think he's the kind who he'll go to Benidorm, he'll be red for a few days, but then he'll come back for the Swansea game looking
incredible. It'll look good when you come home, but during the actual trip to Dubai, he's going to look like he's been sitting in front of a smelting furnace.
Is that going to be on the City 360 video? Shaky in front of a smelting furnace, trying to get himself a tan in Dubai.
I'm looking forward to the City view because I've no doubt that the video guys will go with them to Dubai. It must be nice working for them and getting a nice holiday out to Dubai to go and film some footballers playing for a bit. And I've just got visions of O'Neill putting After Sun on Shaky shoulders or something, or a TikTok, one of O'Neill's TikToks, like, I don't know, drawing something inappropriate on Shaky's back in sun cream or something or other.
Did you ever get a trip to Dubai when you were at the club, Dan?
No, I sent myself to a pre-season friendly in Ireland, and as a really great, I sent someone else to cover the Germany tour as for a couple of weeks, which by all accounts was much more fun than going to Ireland, which is when Johnny Howson refused to train to try and get his move through to Middlesbrough.
Awful,
but it was the friendliest refusing to train, I imagine, in the history of football, though. Very apologetic about it because his agent had told him to do it.
Did he go fishing?
In Ireland? No, wouldn't have had time. He was too busy on the phone to his agent trying to get him to a sunny Middlesbrough instead. It's also when we signed Harrison.
Fishing for a move.
Yes, very good.
Pulled it back, Stu. We'll just have a quick check through the comments. Tom King says, "Can we really see Norwich giving us a relaxed World Cup break by getting?"
No, that was my point, Tom. I can't see that happening. And then also the fact that I'm going to be travelling all the way from Scotland to be there. No.
None of the signs are good. Should just add as well that Sky, well, if you're a football fan, never arrange your Christmas holiday until Sky have decided to decide what fixtures they're going to screen, because our entire Christmas fixture list has been changed. Luton's now at 7:45 on Boxing Day. Reading's been moved, Luton away, I should say. So that'll be fun for anyone wishing to make that trip on Boxing Day. Reading's been moved from the 29th to the 30th of December. That one's at Carrow Road. And Watford, which will also be at Carrow Road, moved from the 1st to the 2nd of January. So yes, that's one to look out for after the break. We will also be taking a break during the World Cup, the podcast that is, which we're all very sad about, just to balance out Michael saying, so that'll be nice, when describing it last week. And other than that, I will put it out to Callum's favourite section, and try not to well up at this point, Kenny Other Business.
Callum has not got Kenny Other Business. I'm
very disappointing. I'm very
Right.
disappointed.
I had something written down, but the tone of the podcast has been very positive and very light. And
Well, we're all
nice.
for
And I didn't-
balance. We're here for
I just
the balance.
want. Do you really want me to round off this podcast with the Kenny Other Business hot take, which is
Depends-
Absolutely, mate. I'm all about hot takes.
what is the hot take now? I'm very.
I promise
intrigued.
you, I haven't just come on the pod of my first appearance this season to then just use it as a soapbox to say something hot take, but it all stems from I'm sure, very, very well read and very well educated caller on Canary Call on Saturday night who used his 5 minutes of Canary Call fame to sort of wax lyrical about how we should have been trouncing Rotherham and how we should be barnstorming our way through this league. And I just wanted to sort of give my 2 cents on that. Like, I don't think we should. I don't think that we should come down from the Premier League and be entitled to absolutely trounce this league. I think we had a very, very good performance in the first time that we won the championship. Then we won the championship in exceptional way, in exceptional quiet circumstances. The second time we did that. So I think we've kind of, as fans, I completely understand that there's probably a lot of fans that have come into this championship thinking, well, we've done it twice and we've got half the players from the first time and the second time that we did it. We've still got Timu Pukki. Why can't we do it again? And I just think that maybe as fans, we need to maybe take a step back and say, do you know what? We don't have the right to demolish this league, and probably when we look back at some of those performances in those years when we did absolutely smash these leagues, there were a couple of scraped wins against small sides. We didn't go to places like Rotherham and absolutely bulldoze them off. How many times did we go to really small clubs that sat deep for 90 minutes and it was through one pure piece of brilliance from a player that we probably didn't deserve to have at our club that unlocked those defences and actually won us that game. So my Kenny Other Business is I think a lot of Norwich fans need to just take a breath, as I'm now going to do, and just focus on the process that's going on here and remember actually the circumstances that we won a lot of those leagues in. And if they think that the only way to win is to play fantastic football, well, we've done that twice in the Premier League and it hasn't worked. So that's my Kenny Other Business. That's my hot take.
Very well said. And that is echoed by Stephen Bird, who says,
yes,
well
my
said,
brother
Callum.
is also in the comments egging
Is
me
your
on,
brother
so...
Stephen Bird?
No, my
Oh
brother.
no, James Howard, same surname. That's the giveaway there. I mean, to be honest, that's a point that's probably that should have been higher up the agenda than Kenny Other Business. I feel like you've
But
wasted
it wasn't going in that direction,
in
and I didn't want to just suddenly. We were like, so what do you think about QPR? Well, actually, I think all of our fans are wrong. It didn't feel like the right time.
Yes, and just for the sake of everyone else's it's Callum who's saying that all our fans are wrong and not any of us. Can I take all
in fairness, right? I'm going to back him up. There's a sense of entitlement set in with Norwich fans as soon as Paul Lambert made the team fight well above the standard of the squad's parts in the Premier League. Then the last 2 championship seasons, in some ways, I mean, one of them fans weren't there, of course, but the one where fans were there, they were spoiled. Rotten with the standard and the entertainment value on show for the football. So I think you're right, Callum. I think you've got to earn the right rather than just assume that you have it. And I think Norwich City fans would be well placed to remember that the club is historically a second-tier club and has no entitlement or divine right to be in the Premier League.
And who was the last manager to keep us in the Premier League?
Oughton.
And did he play fantastic, champagne, entertaining football that got everybody off their seats?
Well, no, but that's depressingly bad football by the end of it. Like being 4-1 or 4-0 down and still having 11 men behind the ball in the last game of the season. Yeah, not really into that. Can I do a Kenny Other Business?
Go ahead.
The Qatar World Cup is an absolute shambles. It's a horrendous travesty that the greatest competition on earth has been taken to a nation like that, and that has administered. I mean, obviously, it was taken there by virtue of corrupt practices by FIFA, which have ostensibly gone unpunished. And now you have a World Cup happening that I could not be less excited about and will not be watching. Thank you to Scotland for not forcing me to have to watch some of it. And yeah, Lionel Messi's last chance to win the World Cup, but I'll not be seeing it because, I mean, over 6,000 workers died in the process of building these stadiums in unsafe conditions. And now the remaining workers that haven't actually died doing the job are being forced out of their houses in order to accommodate fans going over there. It's an absolute affront. And I mean, human rights. I mean, I don't think the parlance exists in that country. It's horrendous, and I'm done with it.
And again, I cannot disagree with any of what you've just said. But on the other hand, come on, Gareth and the boys, let's bring it home. So yeah,
it's not coming home, Stevie.
And Josh Sargent.
And yes, thank you, Dan. Bearing in mind this is a Norwich City podcast, come on, Josh. I don't care. Let's hope for a Josh 40-yarder against England in a glorious 2-1 defeat.
I'm only going to watch the England game for Josh. And if he doesn't start, then I'm probably not going to watch it.
Oh, well, I feel like we're veering off into...
Can I posit another Kenny Other Business?
Of course.
Yes.
What's it about?
Brexit, Pandora's box now. It's all coming out.
Brexit. No, not. Do we think that Gabby Sarah's pass that led to Rotherham's goals in its own way a tribute to Kenny McLean because he plays that kind of pass a lot, and by extension, therefore, a tribute to Kenny Other Business as well?
Well, I think Kenny tends to do it sort of in the opposite direction quite a lot, where he hooks it over his shoulder, often towards his own goal. Sometimes forgets which way he's facing. I think so. I think he, as Sarah would have hooked the ball over his shoulder, over his great hulking shoulders, he would have been thinking to himself, "This is what Kenny would have done," and that's all that any centre midfielder should really aspire to, isn't it? So yeah. I think let's just assume that everything that any Norwich City player does is in some way a tribute to Wits End. I feel like we're on safe ground there.
Can ask one last midfield question? Do you think Marcelino Nunez can play in a diamond?
Oh yes.
Yeah. I mean, he's played in that 2 with Hayden, hasn't he, in a 4-2-3-1. So I reckon he can play in the Kenny or Sarah role, or even at the tip of it.
I would say, if anything, I think he would be better suited to a diamond than he has been to the formations that we've played so far, because I don't necessarily... I think he is more of that kind of Howson's type player who's not really a sitter, and he's not really a number 10.
I think probably bad news for Todd.
Yeah, the fact that he's played quite well recently and still didn't get in ahead of Ramsey in that number 10 role. I mean, and certainly bad news as well for Onel and for Daniel Sinani. I would suggest if the diamond is here to stay.
Sinani has really disappointed me. He was I think he might have been my prediction for player of the season. I definitely thought he was going to be in the mix.
He was certainly Ryan Livermore's prediction for the next time he's on. Let's remind Ryan of that one. Well, as we've all done a Kenny Other Business, I will finish with this. And they haven't all been Norwich City related, which gives me license to ask this from Matt Gregory. Hi, guys. What's your view on bounties being removed from celebrations? Great 3 points of the weekend, OTBC. Thoughts?
Gutted.
Yeah, same.
Can't stand them. So, I mean, for the sake of democracy, they should stay in there, but I wouldn't have been eating them anyway.
I've actually got an answer to this, which is a dreadful impression. It's coconuts! To remove bounties from celebrations. It's a ridiculous.
Do you want to explain who that was an impression of for the younger listeners?
It was an attempt at Brian Blessed, but I don't know if I succeeded. I mean,
I got it. Yeah.
You're cultivating the look as well as the voice.
Not so much. I forget what it was. It was a ridiculous PR stunt done by a company, and yet every major media outlet ran it. Is that the world we live in now?
Would you contemplate commentating for a full 90-minute match as Brian Blessed?
At the Qatar World Cup?
The thing is, Dan, I did roly-polies in a Real Madrid YouTube channel last week. So
what are roly-polies?
My line for how much I will ridicule myself is
pretty. Oh, you right. So I thought that was some sort of vocal exercise or something.
Jam roly-poly. Is roly-poly the? And I feel like I'm saying it in a very posh way.
Scottish.
Is it the Scottish forward roll? Okay.
But it's also kind of that's kind of a childish, euphemistic way of describing it. Maybe
like saying oblong instead of rectangle, which everyone stopped saying oblong about the age of 9 or 10.
My favourite shape is a rhombus.
Sorry?
My favourite shape is a rhombus. My favourite shape's a rhombus, and that's the last one.
And on that note, that is all for today's On the Ball, the Norwich City podcast that's off to work on its Rotherham puns and Brian Blessed impressions. If you haven't already, then make sure you subscribe to On the Ball via your podcast player of choice. It's available free on your usual player. Just search Michael Bailey, Norwich City, or something like that on your preferred social platform, and you'll see Michael's head pop up. Daniel is waving at me.
Can we get Stuart Hodge to say Dale Gordon's alive in Brian Blessed's voice, please?
I'm very happy, Hodgie, if you would like to, if we sign off the podcast with you saying Dale Gordon's alive. I'll just go through all this pre-written spiel and then.
Sorry for interrupting.
No. I mean, this is the most tedious part of the podcast because I'm about to say ratings and reviews wherever prompted are always highly appreciated. And if you want to get in touch with any questions or topic proposals, send Michael a direct message on Twitter at Michael J. Bailey. And you can still send us your suggestions for topics to discuss either by emailing warning for Callum, twitterkers@icloud.com, or by using hashtag twitterkers, TWITTERKERS on Twitter. So a massive thank you to our 3 guests tonight. Callum, I'm sorry about those last 2 mentions of the word twitterkers, but I hope you've had a good time.
I've had a fantastic time. It's been made all the more better to see Hodgie's Brian Blessed impression. I didn't know, I was not expecting that at all when I came on, and the world is a better place for me having experienced that this evening. So thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure. And on the Ball C, let's go sign off this half season with a win.
Well said. There's nothing that can't be made better by a Hodgie impression, good or bad. And Stu, obviously you've got your final sign off, but thank you very much. You're not even going to. Literally saving your voice for the Gordon Alive.
Sorry. Rhombuses and diamonds are very similar, which gives it a nice thematic end. But Dale Gordon's alive.
I mean, we haven't finished yet, but
have we not?
Because I still have to say goodbye to Dan.
I mean, I can't top that, can I? Other than to say it's been a privilege, and I feel blessed as always. Blessed, yeah, to be on the podcast. See what I did there.
It was ever so tempting to just not say goodbye and just literally finish with Hodgie doing that. But anyway, Michael's back and hopefully doing a more professional job of hosting this next week for one final flourish. And we'll have one more game to talk about then, the Borough game before the World Cup. Stu, over to you.
See you the weekend, mate.
I think you were going to say Dale. I think you were going to say
Dale. Am I doing it again?
Live. Yeah, I think that was how that was going to go.
Dale Gordon's alive!
Thank you so much.